Welcome, dear listener. Wherever you are, I invite you now to close your eyes, settle into the quiet, and come with me on a long and winding path into a mystery that has lived in the corners of my mind for far too long. This is my story. This is how I came to live in the house on Wren Hollow. I was 34 when I first heard about the house, though heard might not be the right word. It was more like the house found its way to me. I'd been living in the city for over a decade, chasing deadlines, surviving on black coffee and takeout containers stacked in the sink. The apartment was cramped, just 2 rooms and a window that looked straight into another building's brick wall. But it was mine, or so I thought. One night in late autumn, I found an envelope tucked under my door. There was no name, no return address, only my own name, written in looping, careful script, Elena. Inside was a single key, old and brass, heavy in my hand, and a note torn from some faded ledger. Wren Hollow, find the blue door. I didn't know what to think. I thought it might be a prank, maybe from my sister, maybe from a friend who knew I needed a break. But when I asked around, no one admitted to leaving it. I should have thrown it away, or at least ignored it. But sometimes a mystery plants a seed in your mind, and before you know it, it's grown roots deep enough to pull you from your ordinary life. That was how I found myself driving west, out of the city, with the brass key on a chain around my neck and a suitcase rattling in the back seat. I found Wren Hollow on an old map. It wasn't a town, not really. Just a name on a faded sign off a road no one seemed to use anymore. The trees grew wild here, leaning close to the gravel path, like they were trying to reclaim it. After an hour of winding through those woods, I saw it. A stone house perched at the end of a narrow lane, half hidden by brambles and drifting mist. It was bigger than I expected. Slate roof, cracked shutters, an old swing swaying from the branch of a massive oak. And there it was, the blue door. Weathered paint, a brass lock, and a keyhole that matched the key on my chain. I wish I could say I hesitated, that I stood on that threshold and wondered if I should turn back. But the truth is, I felt as though I'd been here before, in some half-remembered dream. My hand found the lock. The key turned with a click. The door sighed open. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and thyme. Dust floated through the last golden rays of afternoon sun. There were books piled on every surface, mismatched furniture, covered with white sheets. A grandfather clock ticked somewhere down the hall, though I never found it. There was electricity. The lights flickered on when I tried the switch. Running water, too. And on the kitchen counter, a mug still stained with tea, as if someone had just stepped out for a walk and might return at any moment. I should have left then. But curiosity is a hunger that can't be ignored. I unpacked my bag, I made tea on the ancient stove, and when night fell, I chose the smallest bedroom and crawled under a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. I dreamed of whispers, footsteps on the stairs, a woman humming a song I almost knew. Bafidi. In the morning, I explored. The house had 3 floors and a small attic tucked behind a creaking door at the end of a hallway. In every room, there were hints of the people who'd been here before me. A child's marble rolling under a dresser, a broken spectacles case, letters bundled with twine and tucked into drawers. One letter in particular caught my eye. It was addressed to no one, just a single page in delicate ink. To whoever finds this house, know that you do not find Wren Hollow by chance. It calls to you when you are ready. There is nothing to fear, but much to remember. It was unsigned, no date, just that. Mahaita Wat. Days passed strangely there. I would wake to birdsong and the rustle of leaves, make coffee in the cracked mug, and wander from room to room like I was searching for something I couldn't name. Some nights I'd hear the swing on the oak tree creak back and forth, though the air would be perfectly still. Sometimes I heard voices, faint like an echo from another room. Once I caught sight of a figure at the end of the hall, a woman in a pale dress, dark hair falling loose around her shoulders. But when I called out, the hall was empty. I told myself I was imagining things, the way a lonely mind plays tricks, but the house felt alive, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for me to remember something important. One evening, after a week had passed, I climbed to the attic. The key fit the old lock there too. The door groaned open to reveal a single trunk in the center of the floorboards. Dust motes danced in my flashlight beam. Inside the trunk were photographs, hundreds of them, black and white, some yellowed with age. Faces I didn't know, places I'd never been. But in one photo, I saw a woman who looked exactly like me, standing on the front porch of this same house, a little girl holding her hand. My hands trembled as I turned the photo over. On the back, in the same looping script as the letter, Elena and Clara, 1952, Clara. The name was a key of its own, unlocking something deep in my chest. Memories not quite mine. A swing under an oak tree, summer afternoons, a voice calling me inside for supper, a mother's lullaby. I understood then, the house hadn't found me by accident. It had called me home. I stayed in Wren Hollow through the winter. Snow draped the roof in soft silence. The wind whistled through the trees, and sometimes I thought I heard my mother's voice in its hush. I read the letters. I cleaned the rooms. I tended the garden that bloomed in spring with wild roses and lavender. And slowly, I let the past settle into me. The forgotten childhood, the family I'd lost too young to remember. At night, I sit by the window and watch the swing sway in the moonlight. I listen for the footsteps in the hall, the faint humming of the woman I once called Mama. People in town think the house is abandoned. They avoid the lane that leads here. But I know better now. The house on Wren Hollow isn't haunted. It's a keeper of memories, waiting for those who belong to it to come home again. And now when I dream of soft voices and warm hands, of a blue door swinging wide to welcome me. I dream of the swing creaking in the wind and the hush of my mother's lullaby, carrying me gently into sleep. I do not know how many nights have passed since that first snowfall blanketed the roof and silenced the lane that leads here. Time in this house does not move the way it does beyond the trees. Days fold into nights and back again, and I am caught somewhere in between, drifting through the quiet rooms, listening for the soft secrets the walls are willing to share. After I found the trunk in the attic, I began to gather the letters, the photos, the bits and pieces scattered in drawers and boxes and hollowed out books. By the fireplace, I laid them out in careful rows, faces turned upward, fragile pages weighted with smooth stones from the garden path. I spent my evenings piecing together the family that had come before me. A mother named Eleanor, who sang lullabies under her breath. A father named Thomas, who carved his initials into the oak tree when he built the swing for Clara. And Clara, the girl in the photograph with my face, my eyes, my same small smile. Sometimes I wondered if I was Clara, somehow returned. But I am not. I am Elena. Yet the names tangle together in my dreams until I wake with tears on my cheeks and a memory of a mother's perfume that I have never worn. The villagers in town still keep their distance. Once a week, I drive the winding road to the nearest store, a sleepy place that smells of cinnamon and rain-soaked wood. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Alder, eyes me kindly, but with an edge of curiosity. She tries to hide behind polite words. "You staying up at Wren Hollow alone?" she asked me once, bagging my tea and bread. I nodded, and her hands paused just for a heartbeat. "Strange place, that house," she murmured. "Some say it keeps its own time. You watch yourself up there, love." I thanked her and slipped back into the hush of the lane, carrying her words home like a stone in my pocket. One morning I found a door I hadn't noticed before, a small one, hidden behind a faded tapestry on the second floor. It was barely taller than my waist. The handle was cool to the touch, brass and shaped like a tiny bird in flight. Inside was a cramped stairway spiraling down into darkness. I hesitated on the threshold, one hand clutching my candle, the other pressed to my chest to calm the sudden flutter of my heart. I don't know what I expected. Damp stone, perhaps, or some nest of mice and forgotten furniture. But what I found instead was a hidden cellar lined with shelves. On those shelves were more boxes, more letters, jars filled with dried flowers, stacks of yellowed newspapers. In the far corner, an old writing desk stood beneath a single bulb that flickered to life when I found the switch. There, in a leather-bound journal, I found Eleanor's handwriting again, her looping letters spelling out a life too big to stay hidden forever. December 12th, 1952. "Clara is unwell tonight. She talks in her sleep, says she sees people in the walls, hears them calling her name. Thomas says it's just dreams, but I know better. This house listens. It keeps the echoes of every footstep, every breath. I think it keeps part of us too. I only hope when she grows she will remember who she is. I read that line again and again. I only hope she will remember who she is. I sat there for hours, the candle burning low beside me, my breath a soft cloud in the cold cellar air. I imagined Clara, small and pale, hearing voices just as I did now. I wondered if she ever found her way out, or if the house simply gathered her up into its rooms, the way it was gathering me. That night, I dreamed of the oak tree in summer bloom. I was swinging higher and higher, my toes brushing the low branches. A woman, my mother, maybe Clara's mother, stood in the doorway, humming that same lullaby that always finds me when I'm half asleep. I woke at dawn with a name on my tongue. Rowan. Rowan. Another key in this house of locked doors. In the weeks that followed, I searched for Rowan. I combed through every letter, every faded note tucked into the spines of books. I found him at last in the margins of an old Bible. Rowan, born 1949. Brother to Clara. A brother. Another ghost who walked these halls before me. In the attic under a loose floorboard, I found a small wooden horse carved with the name Rowan on its belly. I held it to my cheek and felt warmth where there should have been only cold wood. I began to speak to them, to Eleanor, to Thomas, to Clara and Rowan, as if they might hear me through the hush of the walls. I read their letters aloud by candlelight. I left fresh flowers on the windowsills. I polished the brass keyholes until they gleamed in the moonlight. Some nights the house spoke back, a door closing softly when no wind blew, a music box playing in the parlor, though I had never wound it. I learned not to be afraid. This house was no prison. It was a guardian, a keeper, a patient witness to the lives that passed through its blue door. Spring came slowly to Wren Hollow. The snow melted from the roof in gentle sighs. The swing creaked under the weight of robins and crows. The garden bloomed riotous and wild. Tulips, crocuses, and the lavender that filled my sleep with calm. One warm night, I woke to the sound of laughter drifting up from the garden. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and crept to the porch. There, under the moonlight, I saw them. Shadows dancing by the swing, soft voices tangled with the breeze. A woman's laughter, a child's high giggle. They did not see me, or maybe they did. Maybe they had always seen me, the last daughter returning to a place that never stopped waiting. I stood there until the dawn turned the sky a soft, forgiving blue. When the shadows faded, I whispered a promise into the morning hush. I will remember you. I will remember us all. Now when I sit by the window with my tea and watch the lane disappear into mist, I do not feel alone. The house breathes with me. The walls hold my stories alongside theirs. And I know that someday, when I am only a whisper in the rafters and a footstep on the stairs, someone else will find a brass key under their door, and Wren Hollow will call them home too. Summer arrived so quietly I barely noticed it first. Only the scent of wild roses drifting through the open windows, the soft hum of bees gathering on the lavender. The days grew longer, light lingering in golden pools on the hardwood floors, catching dust motes that danced like tiny spirits in the warm air. I settled into a rhythm. Each morning I rose with the birdsong and opened every window wide, letting the breath of the forest drift through the house. I spoke to the rooms as I passed. Good morning to the parlor. Good morning to the attic. Good morning to the cellar where the secrets waited under blankets of time and dust. When I could not sleep, I wandered the garden paths barefoot, the stones cool against my skin, the swing creaking gently behind me. Sometimes I would feel a touch, soft as a brush of wind, at the nape of my neck or my shoulder, as though someone was walking beside me, unseen. I began to hear music too, faint and sweet, drifting through the halls at dusk. A piano, a violin, a voice humming in harmony. I followed the music one night, candle in hand, down to the small sitting room by the kitchen. There, tucked in a corner beneath an old lace cover, I found the source. An ancient gramophone, still turning though no one had wound it. I sat on the threadbare sofa, the candle flickering beside me, and let the music wash over me. Old songs, full of longing and memory. Notes that seemed to know my name. It was in that same sitting room that I found the second journal. It had slipped behind the sofa, hidden for decades in the shadows. Its pages were yellow and fragile, the ink faded in places, but still legible under the soft pool of candlelight. This one belonged to Rowan, the brother I had never met, but whose spirit brushed against mine whenever I climbed the attic stairs. March 18th, 1955. Mother says the house is ours, but I think it belongs to the woods. Sometimes I see lights in the trees at night. Sometimes I hear my name whispered through the keyholes. Clara says she dreams of a girl who looks like her, but older. She says the girl wears her face like a mask. I read that line over and over. A girl who wears her face like a mask. It felt like Rowan was speaking to me across all these years, reminding me that I am not just Elena, not just Clara's echo. I am both and neither. I am part of this place now. The more I read, the more the house revealed. Behind the pantry, I discovered a narrow hallway, lined with hooks where coats still hung, their pockets full of brittle leaves and stray buttons. At the end of that hallway, another door, this one leading to a root cellar half swallowed by the earth. The air there was cool and damp, and the smell of soil reminded me of childhood gardens I could not quite remember. Along the stone walls, shelves sagged under the weight of old preserves. Peaches, cherries, pickles, sealed tight in glass, forgotten but still beautiful in the glow of my lantern. On a dusty work table, I found a tin box tied with string. Inside, folded so carefully they seemed sacred, were letters addressed to my dearest Rowan, written by Clara herself, her hand steadier and more mature than the childish scrawl I'd seen in other notes. In those letters, Clara wrote of dreams she could not escape. Dreams of leaving the house but always finding herself back here by dawn. Dreams of the swing swaying without wind. Dreams of someone who looked just like her, standing at the end of her bed, watching, waiting. Reading her words, I felt the shape of my own nights, the way my dreams folded around hers like two pages in the same book. Late one August night, the air thick with cricket song and the scent of honeysuckle, I sat on the porch steps with the letters in my lap. Fireflies drifted through the garden like drifting stars, and in the hush I spoke to them, to Clara, to Rowan, to the house itself. I promised I would stay. I promised I would remember. I promised I would carry their names forward, whispering them into the world beyond these woods so they would never again be forgotten. When I fell asleep on those steps, head resting on the warm wood, I dreamed of the blue door opening, not just for me, but for all who had ever stepped through it. A line of shadows and light, laughter and weeping, songs and silence, winding backward into time. Autumn came with its slow golden decay. The trees flamed red and orange, then dropped their leaves like old secrets scattered on the wind. The garden withered back to its roots, and the swing creaked alone in the shortening days. I prepared the house for the cold the way Eleanor must have done, the way Clara must have done, stacking wood by the hearth, stitching the torn quilts, sealing the windows against the coming frost. Each night I lit candles in every room, small beacons of warmth that flickered against the gathering dark. I imagined the house sighing in gratitude, settling its bones for another winter's sleep. One evening, as the first snow began to fall, I found myself standing before the attic door again. The old brass key, my key, felt warm against my palm as I unlocked it one more time. The attic was quiet except for the soft patter of snow on the roof. I sat by the trunk where it all began. The photographs spread around me like fallen leaves. And there, in that hush, I felt it. The truth that had been waiting for me all along. I was not here to solve a mystery. I was here to become part of it. The house is not haunted. It is alive. It is memory. It is a place where lost things gather, waiting to be remembered by those who are brave enough or gentle enough to listen. I pressed my hand to the old wooden floorboards, closed my eyes, and let the house's heartbeat settle into my own. So now when you listen to this, drifting into the dark, soft cradle of sleep, know this: you are not alone. There is always a house somewhere, a house like Wren Hollow, waiting at the end of some overgrown lane, waiting with its doors unlocked and its windows open to the wind, waiting for someone to remember the names written long ago in letters and journals and fading ink. If ever you find a brass key beneath your door, take it, turn it in the lock, step inside. So now when you listen to this, drifting into the dark, soft cradle of sleep, know this, you are not alone. There is always a house somewhere, a house like Wren Hollow, waiting at the end of some overgrown lane, waiting with its doors unlocked and its windows open to the wind, waiting for someone to remember the names written long ago in letters, in journals, and fading ink. If ever you find a brass key beneath your door, take it, turn it in the lock, step inside. Somewhere in the hush, you will find me waiting. In the attic, in the garden, by the blue door that never truly closes. Winter deepened, and the world beyond the trees seemed to slip away. Snow lay thick along the roofline, muffling every creak and sigh the old timbers made. The lane vanished beneath drifts, and the garden wore its shroud of frost, like a promise to wake again come spring. Inside, the house was warm. Warm in the way that only old places can be. Heat clinging to stone and timber, carrying the scent of wood smoke and candle wax. Some nights I woke to the sound of logs shifting in the hearth, even when the fire had died to embers. Other nights I dreamed of footsteps padding softly past my bedroom door. Bare feet on cold floorboards, pausing just long enough to listen, then drifting away. I never opened my eyes when I heard them. I didn't need to. Whoever walked these halls now was welcome here, just as I was. One January afternoon, a storm came. Heavy snow driven by wind that rattled the shutters like old bones. I stood at the window, watching the trees bend and sway, and saw for just an instant a figure standing at the edge of the woods. A child, maybe. Or the ghost of Rowan as a boy. Coat too big, cap pulled low over dark hair. When I blinked, the shape was gone, lost among the blowing snow. But when I stepped onto the porch later, wrapped in my thickest blanket, I found footprints in the drifts. Small, bare, leading from the trees to the garden gate and no farther. I followed them as far as I could, but the wind swallowed them up. I whispered into the snow, telling Rowan he was safe to come inside whenever he wished. I like to think he heard me. In the deepest winter, I turned my attention to the rooms I hadn't yet explored. Some doors in this house seem to hide until you're ready to find them, as though the walls shift, just a fraction, making space for a new memory to unfold. That's how I found the small library behind the hidden panel in the hallway. I'd brushed my hand along the wainscoting 100 times before without noticing the seam. But one night, candle in hand, I pressed where the wood felt warm and the panel swung inward on silent hinges. Inside, shelves bowed under the weight of old books, some leather-bound, some covered in velvet that had faded to dusk blue and moss green. A single chair sat by the narrow window, and beside it, a small table with a journal waiting as though someone had only just stepped away. The library smelled of lavender and old paper. I settled in the chair, journal in my lap, and read by the thin winter light. This journal belonged to Eleanor again. More of her quiet words written in ink that had bled soft at the edges. February 2nd, 1957. Thomas says we should leave this place come spring. He worries for Clara and Rowan, says the house keeps too much of them, but I cannot go. This place is not ours to abandon. It remembers for us the things we dare to forget. If they must go, I will stay. Let the walls keep my voice. Let the halls keep my steps. Reading it, I felt the echo of her resolve, as though her heartbeat still hummed in the beams and stones. I whispered thank you to her shadow in that quiet room and promised I would stay a while longer too. Spring returned, soft and slow. The snow melted from the roof with the hush of a sigh, dripping through the eaves and feeding the garden back to life. Tiny green shoots poked through the cold soil, the promise of flowers and herbs and wildness reclaiming its place. I began to spend my days outside, clearing brambles from the garden's edge, coaxing roses back from their winter sleep. The swing under the oak tree moved again, but now I imagined Rowan and Clara laughing as they pushed each other higher, invisible but not gone. Sometimes as dusk fell and the last light slipped through the branches, I felt a hand slip into mine. Small, warm, weightless. I squeezed back gently, not wanting to frighten away whoever had come to keep me company. One evening, I sat beneath the oak with a notebook in my lap. A notebook that had been blank when I arrived, but was now thick with my own handwriting, a tangle of memories and dreams I'd woven into the house's story. I wrote of the blue door. I wrote of the hidden stairways and the cellar of preserves, the letters and journals, the way the house breathed around me like a patient heartbeat. I wrote of Rowan and Clara and Eleanor, their laughter, their shadows, their secrets that were no longer secrets, but roots feeding the living walls. And as I wrote, I realized I was no longer alone inside my own skin. The house had claimed me as one of its own, not to keep me prisoner, but to keep me whole. Summer came again, full and heavy with green. The lane beyond the trees vanished under tangled vines and wild roses, as though the world beyond Wren Hollow no longer mattered. The gramophone played its soft songs at dusk. The swing creaked under invisible feet. Fireflies gathered at the windows like tiny lanterns, and the garden hummed with the quiet industry of bees and moss. Sometimes I would wake in the middle of the night, slip barefoot down the hallway, and find the parlor full of soft light. Candles flickering though I had not lit them, voices murmuring like lullabies just out of reach. I would stand in the doorway, listening, my heart steady, my breath calm, and I knew that whoever lingered here with me was glad I stayed. So now, dear dreamer, if your eyelids grow heavy as I speak, know that this story has no true end, only seasons turning softly on an endless loop. The house on Wren Hollow stands still and quiet among the whispering trees. The blue door waits for another hand to turn the key. Somewhere in the attic, a trunk sits beneath drifting dust motes, its secrets patient as ever. Somewhere in the cellar, old preserves catch the lantern glow. Somewhere under the oak, the swing rocks, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, carrying a child's laughter across the hush of twilight. And I, Elena, the keeper of this quiet mystery, sit by the window with my pen, watching the lane vanish into dusk, waiting for the next dreamer to find their way home. Good night, dear listener. Sleep deeply tonight, wrapped safe in old walls and soft echoes. May Wren Hollow hold you gently until morning calls you back to your own warm bed, your own blue door waiting just to dream away.